Was Giles at Fort Mott? No, probably.
Yes, Giles was at Fort Mott, and actually, the book by James says that the guy who threw the burning tar ball on the roof of Mott's house and set it on fire was a private by the name of Nathan Savage. Nathan Savage was in the Britain's Neck Regiment, and Nathan Savage owned a home right here.
Wow.
So, yeah, he was there. Yes, sir.
He bought 550 acres. What kind of money and how did he raise it?
That's a good question. Part of it was land that was open, and so he applied for it. He had just been married, so he had a wife, and he was able to obtain land, 50 acres per head because of that,
Applied to,
from the government of South Carolina.
which would be,
At that point, the royal government, yes. And it was a head wife for himself and his wife. He got 50 acres for each. How he obtained the rest of it, we don't know, but we do know that as a surveyor, he obviously knew where the choice pieces of land were, and he knew what was available and when things were going to be open. So, yeah, and part of the 550 acres he did sell to raise money. After the war, that home was burned. He moved back up here, and where the town of Marion is today, what's now Marion County after the war was named Liberty District in honor of our independence. And where Marion lived, there was a small village that they named, where Giles lived, there was a small village that they named Gilesburg. And the first court session was held in Giles's barn. Years later, Liberty District was renamed Marion County. Gilesboro was renamed the City of Marion. And just as in real life, Marion ellipsed Giles. In death later, Giles was ellipsed by Marion again. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Johnston's Island. There's, I think you and I even talked about it. The John Stone was,
Right.
I believe Giles and the Hughs and the Overys and Marion all met to decide that Marion was going to be the commander of their militia. That wasn't the same Johnston.
No, it was not. It was not. Actually, they're not 100% sure where that home was, but most people tend to believe it's over on the edge of Horry County, right? Where Marion and Horry County. So they were not the same place. Yes, sir.
Did Marion impose any type of penalty against men that didn't respond to his call?
That's a very good question, and the answer is yes and no. During the time frame that we're talking about here, prior to Gates coming into South Carolina with the Continental Army, it was very difficult to force people to come. Because remember that the British were technically in control, and you really couldn't make them do it. After that, after Gates and the Continental Army were here, and some semblance of order was starting to be restored, yes, there were punishments for militiamen who did not turn out when called. In Marion's orderly book, there's some interesting punishments, whippings, things like that. So at this point in time, no, it was you were called or you came as a volunteer. There was no legal enforcement that Marion or anybody else had. He did prior, before the fall of Charleston, and then after the Continentals came back into the state, there was a little more discipline. But during this period of time, no. Yes.
Well, just to build on that one, because Marion was not a militia officer to begin with. Up until
That's correct.
Marion, so he couldn't punish anybody anyhow. He had no authority to really punish anybody.
That's a very good point. Marion's commission was a Continental Lieutenant Colonel, and he had no legal authority to order the militia to do anything until after December of 1780, when he himself was appointed as a brigadier general in the militia. At that point, he could give them orders. Now, prior to that, they were volunteering, they were working together. And partially because they recognized his leadership ability, I believe.
In Thane's work on Nathaniel Green, which is narrative and no citations, there is an account there of Marion hanging British soldiers. And when he was criticized for it, he said that they said that he should have shot them. And he said that he couldn't waste the bullet and he could use the rope again. I have never seen or heard that anyplace else except Thane's account. And again, no citations. Have you ever encountered that?
I have not.
It's irritating.
I've never seen that. It is interesting. Any other questions?
I know this. I know that Marion understood the value of exchanging prisoners.
Yes.
And to hang a British soldier would be way out of character.
Now, you're familiar with the Thane work,
Yes.
and it's all narrative, and it states that just unequivocally, and
Well,
I've never
there's,
seen it anyplace else.
I know some authors who are going to speak here today who say things unequivocally. So we'll get there when we get there.
One last question. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us anything about the uniform you're wearing?
Oh, sure. I'm dressed as militia. Basically, this is civilian clothing, and this is a hunting frock. It's what people would have worn out in the woods. I am wearing a hat that was actually worn by Continental troops of the 2nd South Carolina Regiment. You can tell that because of the crescent with the word Liberty on top. And I reenact, and the unit we portray is the Britain's Neck Regiment. And we have documented 12 to 15 guys in the regiment who had been prior Continental soldiers. And having been in the Army, I know that a soldier will steal anything not nailed down. And it's, you have to liberate it and take it home with you. It's a souvenir. And so we theorize that at least one of them would have probably come home with this Continental hat. And so a lot of the militia during that time were a mixed bag of civilian clothing, oddball pieces of military equipment, and things like that. We had several of our real soldiers from the Britain's Neck Regiment who were in the 2nd South Carolina Regiment. Benjamin Munnerling, for one, who was wounded at the siege of Savannah. And of course, Francis Marion commanded the 2nd Regiment, so we kind of like to just wear our 2nd Regimental hats sometimes. Okay, thank you very much.